Hello everyone, let's continue our class. Before we introduce a very important concept of present value, let's take a short review by doing the quick quiz that you see here. The first one is, what is the difference between simple interest and compound interest? And the difference here is simple interest doesn't consider the interest on interest. Compound interest does. And in calculating future value, we use compounding mechanism by considering interest on interest, assuming that investor will invest the interest that they receive in previous years. Now, let's take a look at second question. Suppose you have $500 to invest and you can earn 8% per year over the next 15 years. So how much would you have at the end of 15 years using compound interest? And here, the answer equals 500 times 1 plus 0.08 raised power of 15. You can do the calculation on your BA2 calculator by setting N 15, IY 8, PMT 0, FV negative 500. Then you compute FV to get the answer. The second question is, how much would you have using simple interest? In this case, each every year you earn 8% of $500, that's $40 each every year, and for 15 years you will receive 40 times 15 or $600 total interest as simple interest. And in this class, for any finance calculation associated with future value, you should always use compound interest unless it asks you to use simple interest for your calculation. So the assumption here is you always use compound interest in calculating future value. Now let's take a look at what is present value. Present value is the current value of future cash flows discounted at an appropriate discount rate. And it essentially calculates the value at time 0 on the timeline. And typically present value can help you to answer the following typical questions. How much do I have to invest today to have some amount in the future? What is the current value of an amount to be received in the future? So present value is current value of an amount to be received in the future. Simply is the money today, and the money today should be worth less than its future value. Or money today should be worth less than money tomorrow. Why? Because if you invest money today, you will receive interest, and the future value is greater than its present value. The reason why we applied interest rate here is money has opportunity cost and the future cash flow has risk and uncertainty. So in order to get the current value of a future cash flow, we need to discount. We need to discount the value by using the interest rate, by considering its risk and uncertainty. Once again, here's a timeline of cash flows, and this is 3-year time periods, and it has 4 cash flows from CF0 to CF3, and the time 0 is today. So PV, or present value, is calculating the value of money as of today. Previously, we learned a very important formula for future value. Future value equals present value times 1 plus r raised to the power of t. And if we manipulate this equation a little bit, you see that PV, present value, equals FV divided by 1 plus r raised to the power of t. And this showed you the so-called discounting mechanism. In order to get present value, we simply discount future value of a future cash flow or future cash flows. Let's take a look at one example. Let's say you wanted to calculate the present value of a $100 amount that you're going to receive in 3 years. And here we apply discounting formula. And we can do this through different methods. First one is manual calculation. PV equals FV divided by 1 plus R raised power of 3. So the answer should equal to 100 divided by 1.1 raised power of 3. The answer should be $75.13. And the alternative method is to use your calculator. And here, the game rule is very clear. Once you capture 4 guys, you can calculate the 5th one. And the 5th one is here is PV. And here we set N 3 because this is a 3-year time period. And IY equal 10. 10 means 10%. PMT 0 because there's nothing happened between year 0 and year 3. And FV here is 100. When you do compute CPT PV, you will get negative $75.13. And it carries a negative sign because it shows that you needed to invest. It's cash outflow. And also you can use Excel spreadsheet to calculate PV by initiating PV function on your Excel spreadsheet. Right? And in a typical cell, in a single cell, you do equal PV, then put in interest rate, number of time periods, PMT, and FV to get the answer. Let's take a look at another example. Suppose you need $10,000 in 1 year for the down payment on a new car. If you can earn 7% annually, how much do you need to invest today? This is a typical question for PV. And the future value is $10,000, and you're going to discount this value by using 7% as the discount rate. And the number of time period is 1 because there's 1 year. So the answer should equal to 10,000 divided by 1.7. Or you can use calculator. Set N1, IY 7, PMT 0, FV 10,000. When you do CPT PV, you will get the same number. And the third method is Excel solution. And here you put 0.07 or 7% as the rate, 1 as number of period MPER, 0 as PMT, and 10,000 as FV. And all 3 methods will generate exact same answer. And typically when you do present value calculation, I want you to use at least 2 methods. And make sure that those 2 methods will generate exactly the same number. In that case, your answer would be 100% correct. And here's another example. Let's say you want to begin saving for your daughter's college education, and you estimate that she will need $150,000 in 17 years. If you feel confident that you can earn 8% per year, how much do you need to invest today? Well, college education costs parents a lot of money, and here you see, wow, $150,000, man. If you send your kids to a top-notch private college today, I would say the cost would be much more than $150,000. Right? And the annual tuition would be $50,000, $60,000, or even $80,000 per year. In that case, 4-year college education may cost parents $250,000. So here, anyway, let's do the present value calculation. So in the future, you will need $150,000, that's FV. Then you discounted $150,000 by using 8% as the interest rate, and this, I mean, you need to do discounting for 17 times, and the PV equals $40,540.34. Right, and this example showed you that in order to have large amount of cash in the future, you needed to save. If you save and invest consistently, it can generate a larger amount of money for your future. And here today you invest $40,000, and 17 years later you will get $150,000. Suppose you need $250,000 for your kids' education. Ask yourself how much money that you need to deposit today. And the second way is to use your calculator, and 17 IY 8 PMT 0 FV 150,000. then you compute PV to get the answer. And then here you see, okay, using BA2 calculator could be much more convenient than formula solution. And once again, although you love to use your BA2 calculator, but also I suggest you to use a formula solution to double check your answer every time. Now here's another example. Your parents set up a trust fund for you 10 years ago, and it was $19,671.50. If fund earns 7% per year, how much did your parents invest? Right. So future value, which is 10 years later, is 19,000 something. And you need to discount this number by using 7% the interest rate, and you're gonna discount for 10 times. The answer is $10,000. And you can do the same on your calculator or Excel spreadsheet. So let's review this very important formula for PV. PV is essentially the discounted value for FV, right? Mathematically, that equals FV divided by 1 plus R raised power of T. Now here you see two very important relations. One is the relation between interest rate and the PV. The other one is the relation between number of time periods and the present value. And both factor have negative relationship with PV. So if interest rate increases, present value will be smaller. If number of time periods increases, PV will be smaller. Now here's another example showing you number of time periods matters. If you are going to receive $500 in 5 years, the present value is $310. If you receive same amount of cash flow in 10 years, the present value is much smaller, a little less than $200. And the second relation that you can discover from this equation is the higher the interest rate, the smaller the present value. And you can do the calculation by using BA2 calculator. You will see that, okay, if you receive $500 either from 5 years or from 10 years, of course the present value is smaller. If you receive $500 with higher interest rate. This picture showed you the exponential relation between interest rate and its present value. When interest rate is low, the present value tend to be high, but when interest is getting greater and greater, you see present value will shrink dramatically. So here's a quick quiz question. What is the relation between present value and future value? Well, present value is discounted future value, simply put. It equals future value divided by 1 plus R raised power of T. And R here is interest rate and T is number of time periods. Second, suppose you need $15,000 in 3 years. If you can earn 6% annually, how much do you need to invest today? And this is another question for present value. And what you need to do is to discount $15,000, and present value equals 15,000 divided by 1 plus 6% raised power of 3. Or you can use calculator by setting n equals 3, IY equals 6, PMT equals 0, and FV equals 15,000. Third one, if you could invest the money at 8%, would you have to invest more or less at 6%? And how much? So here, if you have interest that is lower, right? That means your present value will be higher, right? So in this case, you would have to invest more if interest rate is lower, because higher interest rate means lower present value. So here's a reminder of the Five Guys function on your calculator. The rule of the game is to find 4 guys, so you can fix the 5th one. Right? And if you need to calculate the present value, you need to capture N, IY, PMT, and FV. If you need to calculate FV, you need to find N, IY, PV, and PMT. And in this chapter, PMT should be set as 0 because there's no cash flows between time 0 and time t. And also you need to pay attention to the sign of those cash flows. If it's cash outflow, it should carry negative sign. If it's a cash inflow, it should be a positive number. Now, let's take a look at how powerful your BA2 calculator is. And sometimes you need to calculate the implied interest rate. And mathematically, this interest rate should equals FV divided by PV raised power of 1 over T, the all minus 1. And many of you do not like this calculation because it's pretty complicated calculation. But your calculator can simplify the process and help you to get a right answer within 30 seconds. Now let's take a look at one example. You're looking at investment that will pay $1,200 in 5 years if you invest $1,000 today. So the question is, what would be the implied rate of interest? Now, of course, you can use the formula. It equals 1,200 divided by 1,000 raised to power 1 over 5. All minus 1. And the interest rate that can help you to achieve your goal in this case would be 3.7%. Meanwhile, you can use your calculator. And the 5th guy that you need to capture here is IY. Right? Giving you no 4 other guys. So who are those 4 guys? First one, N equal 5. It's 5-year time period. What is PV? PV in question 1,000. Well, PMT should be 0 because nothing happened between time 0 and time 5, and FV 1,200, right? And then you compute, then you see PTIY. When you press computer IY, your calculator will not show you the answer, but arrow 5. So what's the problem here? The problem here is your calculator recognizes direction of cash flow. Look, when you invest 1,000 today, the question is positive number, but you know that is cash outflow. On your BA2 calculator, you need to put a negative sign on this number. So arrow 5 on your calculator reminds you that you need to put a negative sign on one of those numbers, either on PV or FV. In this case, it's on PV because you invest $1,000. So when you do negative 1,000 as PV, then you press CPTIY, you will get 3.714 on your calculator. That means 3.714%. Of course, you can use Excel spreadsheet to do the calculation, and the function that you need to utilize here is rate, R-A-T-E, and you put 4 other numbers into your calculation. 5 as number of time periods, 0 is PMT, and PV is negative 1,000, and FV is 1,200. Here's another example. Suppose you are offered an investment that will allow you to double your money in 6 years. You have $10,000 to invest. What would be the implied rate of return? Right? So everybody wish that the investment can double. Right? And here, you need to know what the rate of interest should be if you want your money to double in 6 years. And here you put N as 6. PV as negative 10,000 because you invest your money, it's cash outflow. PMT 0 and FV $20,000 because you double your money. Then you compute IY. Your calculator will show 12.25. That means 12.25%. Suppose you have a 1-year-old son and you want to provide $75,000 in 17 years towards his college education. You currently have $5,000 to invest. What interest rate must you earn to have $75,000 when you need it? And this is another example in calculating implied interest rate. On a calculator, you can quickly set n as 17, PV as negative 5,000. I mean, here in the question you don't see any negative sign, but you need to figure out the direction of cash flow by yourself. You have 5,000 to invest, that is cash outflow. Therefore, PV should be negative 5,000. Payment 0 and FV 75,000 is positive number because you are going to receive that amount of money in 17 years. And you use CPT-IY, it will show you 17.27, which means your investment return should be 17.27%. So here's a quick quiz. What are some situations which you might want to compute implied interest rate? And here you can compare what you can do today and what you want to achieve in the future in terms of money. And typical question would be how much, what interest rate would be if you want your money to double in 5 years, in 10 years, right? And another example would be, okay, today you have $5,000, and if you need $15,000 in 10 years, then what interest rate it should be? Now let's take a look at the second question. Suppose you are offered the following investment choice. You can invest $500 today and receive $600 in 5 years. And the second choice, you can invest $500 in bank account and paying 4% annually. The question is, what is the implied interest rate for the first choice, and which investment should you choose? And you know, for your second investment, your interest rate is 4%. So you are gonna compare the interest rate for your first choice with your second choice. And here, you can let your BA2 calculator to fix the problem. Simply by setting N5, PV negative 500, PMT 0, and FV 600. And you compute IY to see if it's greater than or less than 4%. And your BA calculator can also help you to do some very challenging mathematical problems. Such as the one that you see here. And sometimes you need to figure out number of time periods that you need to accomplish your certain financial management goals. And a T here equals log function of FV over PV divided by log function of 1 plus R. So that is the solution for T in this very basic formula that reveals the relationship between future value and the present value. Look, it's pretty complicated because you need to initiate the log function, right? But if you use BA calculator, you don't need to deal with such complicated math because your BA calculator can help you to get the answer very quickly and very conveniently within 30 seconds without complicated mathematical calculation. Now let's take a look at one example. You want to purchase a new car and you're willing to pay $20,000. If you can invest at 10% per year and you currently have $15,000, how long would it be before you have enough money to pay cash for the car? So here, what you have, excuse me, what you have here is $15,000, and what you wanted to achieve is $20,000. And your investment return would be 10 years, and you want to know how long you should invest your money to get that $20,000. And on your calculator, the fifth guy that you want to capture is N, number of time periods. And you need to know 4 other guys. IY here is 10 or 10%. And the PV here is negative 15,000. FV 20,000. And the fourth guy, PMT, here should be 0 because there's no cash flow between now and several years later. And when you do compute N, it will show you answer momentarily, which is 3.02. That means 3.02 years. And this example shows you how to fix the number of period problem by using the formula. And here you see calculation is pretty challenging. It's pretty challenging. So my suggestion here is for any time period calculation, you use your BA2 calculator first. Right? And if you want to double check your answer, please use this formula solution. Now here's a quick quiz. When might you want to compute the number of periods? Well, a typical example would be that you have a certain amount of money to invest today, and you wanted to have another amount of money in the future. Given you know the interest rate, you want to know how long you should invest, and this is a typical scenario you need to compute. You need to compute the number of time periods. Now, suppose you want to buy some new furniture for your family room, and you currently have $500, and the furniture you want to cost is $600. If you can earn 6%, how long will you have to wait if you don't add any additional money? Now here, to solve this question, please use your BA2 calculator. Right? What is N? N is something that you need to find out. Right? What is IY? That is 6. What is PV? Negative 500. What is PMT? It's 0. And FV, 600. When you compute N, it will give you the answer. Alright, let's summarize a little bit on what we learned so far in this chapter. And this chapter, I would say, is the most important chapter in this book because it showed you a very basic principle in finance: time value of money. In this chapter, we learned how to calculate both future value and present value of a single cash flow. And here you learn a very important mechanism of compounding and discounting. If you want to calculate the future value, you use compounding mechanism, right? Future value will get greater and greater if you're adding a number of time periods, if interest rate is getting greater. If you want to calculate present value, you use another very different mechanism, which is discounting. And the present value simply equals discounted future value. Longer the time period, higher the interest rate, the lower the present value it will be. Any questions? Any questions? And I want you to practice very diligently on those homework questions, right? And you have to use your calculator for many times, so you can let your friends, which is your calculator, help you to fix a lot of complicated finance problems. If you have questions, please drop your question in D2L discussion forum or send me emails. It's my pleasure to be with you today, and I will see you in next lecture.